What's happening in Texas went from terrible to criminal. So now there are reports of price gouging in various sectors, but probably most prominent of all, energy. So this is from the New York Times. Quote, "My savings is gone," said Scott Willoughby, a 63-year-old Army veteran who lives on Social Security payments in a Dallas suburb. He said he had nearly emptied his savings account so that he would be able to pay the $16,752 electric bill charged to his credit card, 70 times what he usually pays for all his utilities combined. There's nothing I can do about it, but it's broken me. Whoa. Now, he's not the only one. This is one of the most exorbitant bills that I saw, but there's a number of people with bills around $5,000. You know, people can't afford this. People can't afford this. And you have some of the energy providers in Texas who are behind the scenes, and they're jovial. They're celebrating because they think they just hit the lotto and money's going to rain down on them, you know? And listen, this is what happens when you have insufficient regulations in a number of ways. So you would have avoided the whole problem if you winterized the power grid. And so you wouldn't have had the widespread outages. Okay, so that's one way in which regulation could have saved us. Another way in which regulation can and should save us is to prevent these kinds of emergencies and disasters and crises, to prevent price gouging when this stuff happens. Now, what's Texas going to do? I have no idea. Are they going to find a way to sort of punish or rein in the abuses and the excesses of the energy companies and what they're trying to do? I hope so. I hope so. But just so you understand, it's not even just with this. It's not even just with this. It's also with food and water, apparently. Like, of course, some companies and people are donating water, but there's also reports of price gouging for that stuff for hotels as well, really jacking up the rates immensely. So it's ugly, man. It is really, really ugly. And, you know, how many times have we seen this happen where somebody on social media will post a picture and it'll be like an empty grocery store and they'll be like, life under socialism. And it's like a picture from a place that's capitalist during some sort of a crisis or something. You know, like you could easily see a story like this about Venezuela or some other official U.S. enemy baddie government. Say, look at what it's like over there. In the midst of a crisis, you have these terrible oligarchs who are ripping people off. Can you believe that? How inhumane and wrong and undemocratic. I really dislike this. And it's like, what do you think this is? You know, it's yet another example of why regulation is crucially important. Crucially important. You know, you need to be able to stop the excesses of capitalism in a variety of ways. I mean, this is one example here. There should be some sort of price cap or subsidy program or whatever. But this is the case when it comes to all externalities. That's the economic term when you talk about unintended consequences of a capitalist system. The other classic example is, of course, pollution. You know, it is cheaper for a company to get rid of whatever sort of toxic chemicals they have as a byproduct. Just get rid of it in the cheapest, easiest way possible. So there's, of course, famous stories of like companies dumping their toxic waste into rivers, you know? And they're gonna do that unless the government steps in and says, you can't do that. You need to spend the amount of money that it costs, whatever it costs, in order to dispose of this in a reasonable way that's not going to poison people. That's what's called an externality. And this is what happens when you have a totally free, unfettered, laissez-faire capitalist system. That's what it is. And so, you know, we just keep getting examples of why regulation is necessary and why regulation is important. And we needed to prevent price gouging in the wake of a disaster, and we needed it in the first place to winterize the energy grid in Texas so that this didn't happen. But here you have it, man. Here you have it. You have innocent civilians who are victims of a rapacious system that doesn't care about them, you know? And you can't help but think about our priorities in this country when you read a story like this, that the federal government will just throw whatever amount of money at anything involving war. Like what was it, the either $1 to $2 trillion cost of the new fighter jet that didn't work originally, and then finally we got it to work, but like they just threw trillions of dollars at it. It was like, yeah, whatever. We'll spend whatever the hell we want to spend. The increase in the military budget from year to year, you go back 2 years or so, the increase in the military budget for 1 year was more than what a free college bill would have cost for the entire nation. It was like an $80 billion increase in military spending year to year, and $60 billion would have given everybody free college. It's the priorities. It's what everybody chooses, or what the government and the corrupt politicians choose to spend on. Now, I get it. We're talking about federal spending versus state spending, and there is a difference, of course. But just the national priorities and the state priorities. I'm sure if I go through the Texas budget with a fine-tooth comb, I'm going to find a million things that make no sense and that, are resources that should be spent elsewhere. But here you have it. You get slapped across the face with stuff like this on a regular basis. $16,000, nearly $17,000 electric bill for a 63-year-old Army veteran. It's going to bankrupt him. Is this system okay? Does this system make sense? No. I think it needs reform, and it needs it now.